She arrived at the base in a worn uniform, dismissed as a greenhorn by her commanding officer. He laughed, deliberately shoving her during training, spraining her wrist. "There is no room for the weak in special forces," he sneered. But days later, as he celebrated his arms deal, a military helicopter landed unexpectedly. Major Ethan Vance never knew the soldier he tormented was Lieutenant Cassidy Reed, an intelligence officer investigating him. He'd just made the biggest mistake of his life. The cold air of late November still clung to San Diego, California, long after Thanksgiving. A strong sea breeze from the Pacific Ocean carried the scent of salt inland, though it did little to cut through the oppressive heat of the southern sun. Even in late autumn, the sun shone brightly, reflecting off the paved roads and rolling hills of Camp Pendleton. It was here, on a sprawling base that stretched to the ocean's edge, that Major Ethan Vance and his team, Captain Blake Harrison and Sergeant Maria Rodriguez, were preparing for an afternoon training session. Ethan Vance, 32, was a tall man with slicked-back brown hair and cold blue eyes. He stood with his arms crossed, issuing orders to his subordinates. His demeanor exuded smugness. He wore a pristine, freshly pressed uniform, and the expensive watch on his left wrist gleamed in the sunlight. Vance, an ambitious officer, believed he was born to command. Next to him was Blake Harrison, 35, a large man with a square face and a beer belly, whose personality was haughty and crude. Blake wore a worn-out camouflage uniform, but the assault rifle on his shoulder was impeccably maintained. Across from him was Maria Rodriguez, 28, with long black hair pulled back into a ponytail and sharp eyes that seemed to see through anyone who faced her. Maria, fiercely loyal to Vance, looked like a soldier trained from head to toe. Vance was delivering an impassioned speech about the training plan when an old olive-green Jeep suddenly parked in a secluded corner, interrupting him. A female officer stepped out. Her name was Cassidy Smith, 24, with her glossy blonde hair pulled back in a simple bun. Her plain appearance, a stark contrast to the immaculate looks of Vance and his team, immediately drew their unwelcome attention. She wore a faded olive-green uniform that was 2 sizes too big for her petite frame. The uniform was so old that a tear on the right sleeve was only patched up with a piece of black tape. Her white undershirt was yellowing, and her combat boots were scuffed and worn. Vance immediately approached her. He looked her up and down with a sneer, then publicly called her a greenhorn. He mocked her, saying her uniform looked like it came from a charity shop, and labeled her as a weakling undeserving of her position. For the rest of the training session, Vance continuously made things difficult for Cassidy. He relentlessly criticized how she held her rifle, how she navigated obstacles, and how she moved. He wanted her to quit, but Cassidy completed every task with incredible persistence. During the obstacle course training, Vance deliberately shoved Cassidy as she was running. Her wrists twisted, but she did not react. Vance laughed, ordering her to continue without a break. He stood there, waiting for her to give up, but she simply got back up and finished the remaining exercises with a cold, unreadable expression. Vance's behavior towards Cassidy was not instructional. It was pure contempt and humiliation. From her very first day Cassidy had begun her secret mission, she noted suspicious signs, observing that military equipment like night vision goggles and tactical radios were constantly missing. The lavish lifestyles of Vance and his team, with their expensive watches and extravagant parties, were completely inconsistent with their military salaries. Under the guise of a naive officer, Cassidy secretly used miniature listening devices and a camera with a super zoom lens to record their conversations. She quietly eavesdropped on Vance and his team, quickly realizing they weren't just arrogant. They were also corrupt. The humid air of the San Diego winter seemed to amplify the silence in the base's technical lab. With her sprained wrist now wrapped tightly in a brace, Cassidy was officially relegated to administrative duty. The physical distance from the main training grounds gave her a new kind of freedom. Major Vance and his cohorts continued their taunts, now mostly out of earshot. Their cruel nickname, Cassie the Cripple, was a whispered punchline in the mess hall and barracks, but it was a small price to pay for the opportunity she now had. One afternoon, while trying to access a secure server, she was approached by Alex, a young, lanky IT specialist with thick-rimmed glasses and a nervous demeanor. Alex, 22, was dressed in a standard-issue uniform that was a little too big for his slight frame. His gentle nature stood out in the harsh military environment. He quietly offered to help, his voice barely a whisper. "The system's got some quirks. I can help you find a back door." He didn't ask questions. He just seemed to sense that she was in over her head, or at least that's what he was meant to believe. He lent her a spare laptop and pointed her toward the network's blind spots, unmonitored terminals in the forgotten corners of the base. Cassidy used the isolation to her advantage. With Alex's simple guidance, she was able to navigate the base's internal network. She discovered a glaring hole in the armory's inventory system. The electronic logs showed a large number of items: night vision goggles, encrypted radios, even a few high-end assault rifles, as salvaged or misplaced. The dates of these losses coincided perfectly with Vance's team's lavish spending sprees and lavish parties. The deeper she dug, the more she uncovered. Her investigation led her to an encrypted email address used for communication with a known arms dealer. The messages were cold and transactional, referring to weapons by code names. "The Black Dogs will arrive with the shipment," referring to assault rifles. "The eyes of the owl have been sent," referring to night vision goggles. The evidence was mounting. Using a secure satellite phone she carried with her, Cassidy compiled an initial report. She included timestamps, inventory numbers, and the encrypted communications. She sent the report to her father's intelligence team, along with her location and a brief message. Initial findings confirmed. "They are running a large-scale smuggling ring using logistical cover. Stand by for my final signal." Her hands trembled slightly as she hit send. The loneliness of her mission was finally catching up to her, but her resolve was as strong as ever. A thick fog had settled over the base that night, making the air heavy and damp. Inside the technical lab, the silence was broken only by the hum of servers. Major Vance, his face twisted in a mask of rage, had found Cassidy's hidden USB drive. He held it up, his hand trembling. "I knew it! You're nothing but a spy," he hissed, his voice a low growl. "You little rat." He raised his hand, his eyes burning with a cruel fire, ready to strike her. Cassidy, however, was as still as a statue. She didn't flinch, didn't back down. She simply watched him, her gaze unwavering, a quiet defiance in her hazel eyes. The moment felt suspended in time, the tension so thick it was almost suffocating. Just as Vance's hand was about to connect with her cheek, the door to the lab swung open with a resounding thud. A team of armed military police burst into the room, their movements sharp and precise. Leading them was Colonel James Dalton, 50, a formidable man with a stern face, a grizzled beard, and a uniform that was as crisp as his reputation. He carried himself with an authority that commanded instant respect. Vance stood frozen, the USB drive still in his hand, a look of utter shock on his face. He thought it was a routine inspection, a small inconvenience he could easily talk his way out of. Colonel Dalton's voice was as sharp as a blade. "Major Vance, you are under arrest for insubordination and suspected treason. You have the right to remain silent." Vance scoffed, a sarcastic smile playing on his lips. "You can't be serious, Colonel. This is all a mistake." Dalton didn't dignify him with a response. He simply nodded to one of his men, who flipped on a large monitor at the front of the room. The screen flickered to life, revealing the imposing face of General Marcus Reed. His presence alone filled the room, and Vance's smug grin vanished, replaced by a look of confusion. The general looked directly at Vance and, in a clear, unwavering voice, read out the charges. "Major Ethan Vance, you are charged with military conspiracy, illegal arms trafficking, and misuse of military funds." Vance's face drained of color as the words sank in. The general then turned his gaze to Cassidy, a look of profound pride on his face. "Lieutenant Reed, you have completed your mission with exemplary courage and professionalism. You may now reveal yourself." A gasp echoed in the room as Colonel Dalton stepped forward. "I would like to introduce you all to Lieutenant Cassidy Reed," he announced. "Not only the daughter of General Reed, but also one of our military's finest intelligence officers." Vance's face turned white as a sheet, his eyes wide with horror and regret. as he finally understood the true identity of the woman he had so cruelly tormented. The military courtroom was stark and cold, its walls a dull gray that seemed to absorb all sound and emotion. The trial of Major Ethan Vance was swift and conclusive. The evidence Cassidy provided was irrefutable. She testified with a quiet authority, presenting the findings from her investigation, the audio recordings, and the financial records that confirmed the conspiracy. Vance's face, once full of arrogance, was now pale and gaunt. He looked nothing like the proud officer he once was. The judge's voice boomed as he delivered the verdict. Guilty. The sentence was severe. For trafficking illegal arms to a hostile power, abuse of rank, and assault on a fellow officer, Vance was sentenced to life in prison and stripped of all military rank, honors, and benefits. A collective shudder went through the courtroom. Captain Blake Harrison and Sergeant Maria Rodriguez were also convicted as accomplices. They received long prison sentences and a dishonorable discharge. With the trial over, a new atmosphere settled over the base. Cassidy, now officially reinstated as Lieutenant Cassidy Reed, was met with newfound respect. The scornful whispers had been replaced by genuine admiration. The quiet IT specialist Alex, who had helped her without a second thought, was personally recommended by General Reed for a higher position in the military's IT department. His honesty and kindness were rewarded. The commendation ceremony was held on a clear afternoon. General Reed, a formidable man with a stoic expression, gave a speech filled with pride. He spoke of Cassidy's courage, her integrity, and her unwavering dedication to duty. He spoke not just as her commanding officer, but as a proud father. After the ceremony, Cassidy stood on the helicopter pad, the wind whipping her hair around her face. For the first time, she had let her long blonde hair down. It cascaded freely, catching the sunlight. She no longer had to hide who she was. A new set of rank insignia glittered on her shoulder, a symbol of her promotion. She had endured contempt and humiliation, but had emerged victorious through her patience, intelligence, and bravery. Her journey had come full circle. Her life was back on track, and she had found her rightful place in a world where she once had to hide her identity. She stood tall, a testament to justice and the triumph of those who believe in what is right. And so, Cassidy's journey teaches us that even when the world is filled with contempt and injustice, a quiet strength, guided by faith, can prevail. Her victory wasn't just about a career or a title. It was a testament to the divine thread of justice that runs through our lives. It reminds us that miracles aren't always grand, flashy events. Sometimes a miracle is simply the courage to stand firm, to trust that goodness will triumph, and to have faith that God is watching, protecting, and guiding the hearts of those who seek the truth. Just as Cassidy's unwavering spirit led her to a place of light, may we all find the resolve to do what is right, even when it's the hardest path to take. Remember, every step of our own journey is a chance for a new beginning. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment below, let us know where you are watching from, and subscribe to the channel for more stories of justice, courage, and faith. May God bless you and your loved ones.